Hi, I'm Keek, and welcome to Countdown to Catastrophe, a video series where I explore the historical processes that brought us to our present-day predicament. And in episodes 6 through 10 of this series, I've been outlining generally what I mean when I say present-day predicament, looking at 4 main existential threats. And in this video, we'll be talking about the 4th and final existential threat, which is the threat of right-wing dictatorship. Now, Donald Trump is almost certainly going to be our next president and possibly our last president. According to one early January 2024 ABC News IPSOS poll, Joe Biden's approval rating was lower than any other presidents had been in the last 15 years. And in most of the recent head-to-head polls between Biden and Trump, polls have Trump outright winning. Hillary Clinton couldn't beat Trump when the polls were in her favor. And the Trump's been up to lately has been crazy. In office, he's set to implement Project 2025, a political purge of tens of thousands of federal civil servants to be replaced with Republican loyalists. Axios reporting revealed that one of the questions in the application process is set to be, name one person, past or present, who has most influenced the development of your political philosophy. And I guess if you say like Ayn Rand or Jesus or Mussolini, you get the job. And when Sean Hannity asked Trump, are you going to be a dictator?
We love this guy. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay?
In December, Trump said of undocumented immigrants that they were, quote, poisoning the blood of the country. Hitler said that. Hitler said that about the Jews. And recent reporting shows he plans mass roundups of undocumented immigrants to be held in camps until they're deported extrajudicially. And he also plans, according to verified reporting, a domestic political crackdown. First, on his personal opponents like William Barr and the Biden family. Okay, like they can eat dicks. But more importantly, if there are protests in response to his election or in response to his inauguration, he plans to invoke the Insurrection Act. Recall, in 2020, National Guards were brought into cities to protect property during the George Floyd unrest. Now imagine, instead of state National Guards and police departments, it's a U.S. Army, likely pointing guns at unarmed protesters. And something has to be said about the police too, because they're planning something. Look at Cop City. In Atlanta, the government has been trying to tear down the last municipal forest to put up a $90 million training facility for the police and fire department, Cop City. And it was first proposed in 2021 because morale was down after the George Floyd protests. And in the process of trying to build it, protesters have occupied the forest in order to prevent the construction of the facility, to which the city has responded repressively. In the process, killing activist Tortuguita and nailing 61 protesters with RICO charges. Now, I'm old enough to remember a time when we weren't really allowed to use the word fascist. Even Robert Paxton, an authority on fascism, wrote in May 2017 in a piece for Harper's Magazine that while Trump acted like a fascist, having violence at his rallies and centering nationalism in his political project, there were 4 ways in which Trump was distinctly not a fascist. Unlike Hitler or Mussolini, Trump left economic, social, and environmental matters up to market forces, and he also sought no territorial gains. Now, Paxton later decided to walk that back after January 6th. But what happened that day doesn't resolve sort of that contradiction that he had originally identified. So let's look here at really what this fascist moment is distinctly in the 21st century. Trump's authoritarianism was unique to neoliberalism, late capitalism, and neocolonialism. Political scientist Sheldon Woolen in 2003 discussed the phenomenon of inverted totalitarianism, writing, while the current system and its oppressives share with Nazism the aspiration toward unlimited power and aggressive expansionism, their methods and actions seem upside down. While under the fascist regimes of old, the state took the lead in most matters, in the 21st century, fascism sort of seeks to bolster corporate dominance of all aspects of life. Now, when Paxton wrote that essay initially, he was only working with Trump's campaign and with the first few months of Trump's presidency. When we look at his presidency as a whole, we find that Paxton's 4 qualifications end up either being met or not being met because the method of totalitarianism that Trump sought was inverted totalitarianism. I call this postmodern fascism. You can call it whatever you want. Here, Trump was wholly an inverted totalitarian, clearing the way for complete corporate dominance. Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was referred to by Josh Hoxie of the Institute for Policy Studies as the biggest wealth grab in modern history. The largest cut was to the corporate tax rate, which slashed it from 35% to 21%. They also gave companies a 50% tax break on foreign profits, encouraging outsourcing of jobs, even though rhetorically Trump was opposed to globalism.
The corrupt globalist establishment.
While Trump renegotiated some trade deals like NAFTA, he added only marginal protections, which failed to limit jobs leaving the United States. By the time he left office, over 200,000 jobs had gone overseas. He also oversaw a deregulatory regime, which saw the repeal of rules like an Obama-era one, which required trains carrying oil or flammable materials to have more safe electronic brakes installed. And of course, as talked about in the previous video, harsh immigration laws support a system of globalized capitalism in order to keep workers in their respective countries pitting their wages against each other. Trump had a horrendous immigration policy, which saw the taking away of thousands of children from parents and the ban of millions of Muslims being allowed to enter the country. And many of the detainment facilities that undocumented immigrants were being held in were ran by private corporations. Between January 2017 and October 2020, billionaires saw their wealth increase by $1 trillion. Now, on social matters, Trump's policies in the end were pretty straightforward totalitarian. Trump attempted or undertook 72 actions deemed anti-transgender or anti-LGBTQ by the National Center for Transgender Equality, including repealing a Department of Housing and Urban Development rule protecting transgender people from discrimination in homeless shelters receiving federal funds, and implementing a ban on transgender people from joining the military. Trump would repeal an Obama-era ban on transfers of certain types of military equipment to local police forces in 2020 when George Floyd is killed, Breonna Taylor is killed, Rayshard Brooks is killed, Dijon Kizzee is killed. He oversaw a violent crackdown of the protest movement in response to those killings, replete with federal agents secretly being deployed to cities across the US, disappearing protesters, and the use of tear gas to clear the way so that he could stand in front of a church and hold up a Bible he's never read.
It's a Bible.
And then, of course, his Supreme Court justices overturned Roe. Here again, we see inverted totalitarianism. The neoliberal right-wing movement that Trump came to power as the leader of had for years been adamantly opposed to even suggesting that human activity could somehow negatively affect the environment. One study on Fox News coverage in the early half of 2019 found that 86% of climate coverage was dedicated to climate denial. In office, Trump authorized the Dakota Access Pipeline through Sioux Nation land, repealed over 100 federal rules protecting the environment, and pulled out of the Paris Climate Deal. Now here we see sort of a mix of mostly inverted totalitarianism, but this claim that he sought no territorial gains is not 100% true even. During Trump's tenure, and still today, there has been a geopolitical struggle over the trade routes in the Arctic. Now a lot of people laughed when Trump said that he wanted to buy Greenland, but he was dead fucking serious. In 2020, he signed a $12 million economic development package with Greenland, in part understanding, and this is really up, that the ice on Greenland is melting, and that under that ice likely are oil reserves. Outside of Greenland, Trump didn't really seek any formal territorial gains. However, consider history. Between 1912 and 1933, the US was bogged down in a bloody military occupation of Nicaragua, intent on allowing US corporations to ravage the country. David Harvey notes, as an alternative to this unsustainable colonial practice, the US developed a more open system of imperialism without colonies during the 20th century. century. So after the US pulls out of Nicaragua, we support the Somoza dynasty. In Haiti, we support the Duvalier dynasty. While we would continue to have large-scale military operations following World War II with Korea, Indochina, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Vincent Bevins notes that during the Cold War, we developed a sort of more refined method of intervention in order to prop up these neo-colonial regimes. This took place through a series of increasingly covert interventions that utilized coups to install tyrants. We saw it in Iran, Guatemala, Indonesia, various military regimes throughout South America, which led to the brutal repression of the 1970s that killed tens of thousands of people. We saw covert action institute brutal genocidal regimes in Central America in the 1980s. And in the 21st century, we see the continuance of less hands-on action determining the leadership in countries like Honduras and Bahrain, Yemen, and Libya during the Arab Spring. Obama especially developed violent covert methods of supporting repressive regimes with airstrikes, drone strikes, targeted killings, and military aid in Afghanistan, Somalia, Pakistan, and Yemen. Trump radically expanded those operations, leading to massive spikes of civilian casualties, numbering in the thousands in the very first months that he took office. He also dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan, bombed Syrian government targets, and assassinated Qasem Soleimani, head of Iran's Quds forces, played a role in coups in Bolivia and Brazil, sponsored a Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria to attack one of the only truly democratic experiments in the Middle East, that of Rojava, led by the Kurds, funded Israeli expansionism and even moved the US embassy to Jerusalem, aided Saudi Arabia in a genocidal campaign in Yemen, enforced crushing sanctions on Cuba and Venezuela, which almost led to war, expanded the US military footprint across Africa, and hyped up the US military budget, flooding the coffers of the military-industrial complex. Now, since Trump left office, after the show that was his presidency, I don't know if you guys remember 2020, but there was massive protests to police brutality. No one had a fucking job. Everyone had COVID. Life expectancy declined. Things were but his base has only gotten more crazy. In the 2022 to 2023 school year, there were over 3,300 book bans, up from only 2,500 the year before. Montana, last May, became the first state to ban Drag Queen Story Hour. Florida is using PragerU as official educational material. And if you don't know what PragerU is, like, they're just fash.
Columbus Day. The day where progressives indoctrinate your children into believing Columbus to be Satan incarnate.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott put fucking razor wire on the border, which has led to an unknown number of deaths of undocumented migrants. And since Elon Musk took over Twitter, they've had just like this base where they can say all the worst shit publicly on a mainstream platform used by like many, many millions of people. And like, I was writing this script. I take a 5-minute break, go on Twitter. The first thing that comes up is this woman mad that black people are a scheme. Like, they're just allowed to say all the worst shit now and have this massive platform. And so this sort of is my attempt to outline inevitably what we will be faced with in January 2025 when Trump becomes the next president. And more broadly, this episode and the 4 episodes before it have tried to outline what I mean when I say present day predicament. And I don't know if you can tell, but like, we're fucked. The doomsday clock was just set last month, and they put it again at 90 seconds to midnight, which is the closest that it's ever been. In the next episodes, I'm gonna try to start to bridge the gap between the first 5 episodes, where we looked at like the American Revolution and stuff, and these most recent 5 episodes where we looked at the present day predicament. And we'll see that there is really an arc from Jamestown all the way till today in which we are and if you want to know more about that arc of history that brought us to our present day predicament, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and so publishers will look twice at my book.